My name is Gwen Miller. I'm 39 years old. 22 years ago, my parents kicked me out of the house for getting pregnant in 11th grade. 17 years old. October rain, 1 suitcase. My mother pointing at the door telling me I was dead to them. That same night they signed papers erasing me from the family. Me and any child I might ever have. I kept those papers. I kept everything. For 2 decades I was invisible. They told everyone I'd moved abroad. Built their spotless reputation on the grave of the daughter they threw away. Then last week they showed up at my door desperate, smiling, demanding to meet their grandson, a grandson they'd bragged about for months to 250 of their most powerful friends. They offered me $350,000. They had no idea that the grandson they'd been promising everyone didn't exist, and what they found instead would tear apart everything they'd spent 40 years building. Denver, Colorado, October 2002. I was 17, a junior at St. Cecilia's Academy, and the youngest child of Robert and Donna Miller. On paper, we were the perfect family, a masterpiece painted for the world to admire. My father owned a highly successful real estate law practice downtown, Miller and Partners, established in 19. My mother had been the reigning queen of the Parent-Teacher Association for 5 consecutive years. Every Friday we sat in the front pew at Good Shepherd Church. We wore coordinated outfits my mother picked out each Thursday night like costumes for a stage play. But behind closed doors, every family has a strict hierarchy. I learned my place at the very bottom before I even knew how to spell the word. Nolan, my older brother, was 24 and in his 2nd year of medical school. He was the golden boy, the shining star who would carry the heavy Miller crown. Clara, 21, was studying to become a teacher. She was the beautiful, agreeable daughter who never dared to question a single rule. And then there was me. I am just the leftover pieces of a family that was already finished. That was my daily thought. I was what my mother coldly called the surprise. Born when she was 36, 5 long years after she was certain she was done raising kids. I don't think she ever forgave me for ruining her perfect timeline. The signs of my unimportance were quiet but everywhere. Our living room wall was a gallery of professional family photos, gleaming in expensive silver frames. Somehow my school portraits never made the cut. During dinner, the heavy oak table felt like a stage I wasn't allowed on. Conversations always spun around Nolan's clinical shifts or Clara's student teaching. Whenever I tried to speak up, mentioning I made the honor roll, my father would barely glance away from his steak. "That's nice, Gwen," he would mutter, instantly turning his back to me. I learned to shrink, to swallow my words, to need absolutely nothing. My father loved to repeat the same chilling warning at every holiday dinner. Reputation takes 30 years to build and 10 minutes to destroy. I didn't understand how heavy those words really were, or that I was destined to become the 10 minutes he feared the most. To survive the crushing silence of my house, I found a hideout, the downtown public library. It sounds boring to most, but to me it was heaven. The smell of dusty pages and old floorboards felt like a warm hug. It was the only place on earth where nobody compared me to my brother or sister. I sat there 4 afternoons a week. I told my parents I was studying, but the truth was simpler. I just needed to breathe without feeling guilty for taking up air. That is where I met Miles Warren. Miles went to Jackson High, the local public school my wealthy parents acted like didn't exist. He was 18, working part-time at his uncle's auto repair shop. He had grease under his fingernails and the absolute kindest brown eyes I had ever seen. One September afternoon, my mother forgot to pick me up from school. Again, it was the 4th time that month. I had walked 2 miles in the cold to the library, and my chest felt tight with the familiar sting of being forgotten. I hid in the biography section, tears quietly spilling onto my open notebook. "Hey," a gentle voice interrupted. I looked up. He slid into the wooden chair right across from me. He didn't mock me. He didn't look away. "You okay?" he asked softly. "Am I?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Nobody had bothered to ask me that in years. I wiped my face, utterly speechless, but he just smiled a soft, patient smile. We dated in total secret for 3 magical months. He was steady. He listened to every word I said like it was the most important news in the world. For the first time in my 17 years, I felt like a human being. He made me feel like I mattered, like I was someone truly worth remembering. But standing in the warmth of his attention, I had no idea that a ticking time bomb was already planted in my life, one that was about to blow my fragile sanctuary into a million jagged pieces. September 25, 2002. The date is burned into my memory like a terrible scar. I was trapped in a filthy gas station bathroom 4 miles away from my strict private school. The harsh fluorescent light flickered above me, buzzing like an angry wasp. I stood frozen over the cheap plastic stick on the sink counter. 2 pink lines. This isn't happening. Please let this be a mistake. My hands shook so violently I dropped the plastic wand onto the cracked tile floor. The air in that tiny stall suddenly vanished. I couldn't pull a single breath into my lungs. When I finally found the courage to tell Miles, I fully expected him to run. Boys his age always vanished when things got tough. But he didn't flinch. He didn't make a single hollow excuse. Instead, he reached out and wrapped his rough, grease-stained hands tightly around my trembling ones. "We will figure this out together, Gwen," he promised, his voice incredibly steady. "You are not alone." Looking into his warm brown eyes, a tiny part of my shattered heart wanted to believe him. I desperately needed to feel safe. But reality was a cruel monster. I knew my parents better than anyone. I knew exactly what mattered inside the Miller house. Whenever I broke the news, their first question would never be, "Are you okay, sweetie?" It would instantly be, "What will the neighbors think?" I decided to rip the bandage off during our formal Friday dinner. I had no idea that evening would be the very last meal I would ever eat under their roof. Friday, October 11th, 2002. Exactly 6:45 p.m. The dining room felt heavier than a tomb. The roast beef on my porcelain plate was terribly overcooked, gray and dry. I stared at the meat, chewing on the inside of my cheek, hunting for a scrap of bravery. Across the table, my father was loudly complaining about a tedious property boundary dispute. My mother was busy calculating which wealthy families were worthy of an invitation to the church Christmas gala. "Just say it. Before you lose your nerve. Just open your mouth. I have something to tell you." The words tumbled out frail and thin. The heavy silver cutlery stopped scraping against the expensive plates. The massive room went completely terrifyingly quiet. 4 faces slowly turned toward my end of the table. My parents. Nolan, who was home visiting from medical school. Clara, back from her college campus. I was exactly 9 weeks pregnant, and the secret was eating me alive. "I'm pregnant. Clara." My mother's heavy silver fork slipped from her fingers, smashing against her plate. My father did not blink. He did not move a single muscle. When he finally spoke, his voice was pure ice, sharp enough to cut bone. "Who is the father? Is it a boy from St. Cecilia's?" My mother whispered, her face draining of all color. "Someone from a family we know?" I swallowed hard. "His name is Miles Warren. He goes to Jackson High. He works at an auto shop." "You've been sneaking around with a public school boy?" My mother looked physically sick. "He's a good person, Mom. He truly is." "Does he come from a good family?" My father interrupted, ignoring my defense entirely. "What does his father do?" "He lives with his uncle." My voice cracked. "He fixes cars." The silence that crashed down on the room lasted exactly 15 unbearable seconds. I counted every single tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Tick, tick. Then, my father slowly stood up, towering over the table like a judge delivering a death sentence. "You will not keep it. Robert," my mother started to whisper, but he silenced her with a single glance. "She will not destroy everything we have built in this town," he snarled. He stared down at me, and the look in his eyes made my blood run freezing cold. He wasn't looking at his youngest daughter anymore. He was staring at a piece of garbage that needed to be swept away. "If you keep that baby, Gwen," he declared, each word dripping with venom, "you are no longer a part of this family." I sat frozen in my chair, staring at the 4 people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, suddenly realizing the most horrifying truth of all. They were about to throw me straight into a storm, and I didn't even have a coat. By 8:30 p.m. the nightmare became real. I stood shivering on the concrete front porch, clutching a single hastily packed suitcase. Freezing rain soaked right through my thin wool sweater, chilling me to the bone. My mother had physically opened the heavy oak door and simply pointed her manicured finger into the dark night. Not my father. My mother. I glanced up, the icy drops stinging my eyes. Nolan and Clara were shadowy figures watching from the warm upstairs window. Neither of them came down to help. They are choosing his money over my life, I realized, my chest cracking open. I dragged my luggage to a rusted payphone at the Maple Street gas station. My wet hands were shaking so violently I could barely push the metal buttons. He picked up on the second ring. "Gwen, what's wrong?" "They threw me out," I sobbed. 15 minutes later, tires screeched against the wet pavement. Miles leaped from his uncle's beat-up truck before it even fully stopped. He rushed over, wrapped me tight inside his massive grease-scented jacket, and pressed my head against his chest. "I've got you," he fiercely whispered into my wet hair. "I've got you." We had absolutely no plan, just $400 between us, A truck with terrible brakes and a roaring world spinning way too fast. That is exactly when Miriam Taylor stepped in and saved my life. She lived 4 houses down from our mansion, a 65-year-old retired schoolteacher. She was the only human being on our entire block who refused to bow down to my wealthy father. She had seen me standing alone in the brutal storm from her living room. Knocking on her heavy wooden door at nearly 11 at night felt terrifying. But she opened it instantly. "You can stay here," she said firmly, her eyes full of quiet fury aimed at the Miller house. "As long as you need." We spent 3 deeply grateful weeks hidden in Mrs. Taylor's floral guest room. Eventually, Miles found us a tiny 1-bedroom apartment far away in Portland. Rent was a flat $550 a month. It sat right above a noisy laundromat that permanently smelled like harsh bleach and fragile, second-hand hope. My parents did not waste a single second mourning my absence. They had their expensive lawyers draw up the brutal paperwork the exact same night they banished me. I know this horrifying detail because my father mailed me a copy 4 days later. It arrived via certified mail demanding my signature. I was no longer a daughter. I was a cancelled business contract. Sign on the dotted line to confirm your own deletion. The thick legal document stated that Gwen Miller permanently forfeited all rights to inheritance. It declared the Miller family bore zero legal or moral obligation to me, or to any child born to me. I folded that cold piece of paper. I have kept it hidden in the dark for 22 years. Layla Gwen Miller Warren took her first breath on June 8, 2003, inside a cramped room at Providence Medical Center. 6 pounds 8 ounces, 10 tiny fingers, 10 perfect toes. She had her father's beautiful, soulful brown eyes, and my stubbornly set chin. She came out crying at the top of her lungs. "Good, scream loudly," I thought, pulling her warm little body against my chest. Never let anyone in this cruel world make you small. The next 4 years were a chaotic, exhausting blur of desperate survival. Miles pushed himself to the absolute limit, working endless double shifts at a dusty repair shop in Beaverton. Meanwhile, I studied late into the night, earning my GED. Then I tackled community college courses, squeezing homework between Layla's nap times. We survived on cheap instant ramen noodles and stale loaves from the bakery's free day-old bin. I learned to sew thick patches over ripped jeans just to make a single dollar stretch until it practically begged for mercy. Hoping for a miracle, I bravely mailed my parents a colorful birth announcement. Silence. On her first birthday, I sent a smiling photograph. Nothing. By the time Layla turned 3, my heart finally accepted the bitter truth. I stopped trying. Miles and I never had a real wedding. We constantly promised each other someday, whenever we could finally afford a beautiful dress and a simple cake. But life kept throwing hurdles, and someday kept getting pushed further away. Then came April 12, 2008. A reckless delivery truck blew through a red light on Burnside Street. Miles was simply driving home from another exhausting night shift. The grim-faced police officer standing on my worn welcome mat told me he died instantly on impact. He was only 24 years old. Layla was barely 5. The cheap life insurance policy from his mechanic job paid out exactly $15,000. That was the grand total. $15,000 to replace 24 years of a profoundly good man's life. I was merely 23 years old, a grieving single mother clutching a terrified little girl. I had a tiny bank account and absolutely no one left to call. The world had just swallowed my only safe harbor, and as the cold reality closed in around me, I knew I was about to face the most dangerous fight of my life. I could have completely given up right then. The heavy darkness of grief was so tempting. Just close your eyes and let the floor swallow you, my exhausted brain whispered. But I looked at my 5-year-old daughter sleeping softly on our thin mattress. I didn't quit. If I shattered into pieces, Layla would fall right through the cracks. While Miles was still alive, I had started taking on tiny interior design projects. I decorated cramped apartments for struggling neighbors who couldn't afford fancy professionals. I staged empty homes for desperate real estate agents willing to take a massive risk on a young mother with absolutely zero credentials. "You have a magic eye for this," people often told me. I had a rare gift for making cheap, tiny spaces feel like a warm, safe harbor. After the funeral, I threw my entire soul into that work like my actual life depended on it. Because it truly did. Every single waking second became a frantic, breathless sprint against crushing poverty. Sleep was a rare luxury I couldn't afford. Failure meant losing the only family I had left. In 2010, the universe finally shifted. I met Evelyn Vaughn at a crowded design workshop at Portland Community College. She was 55, a recently retired creative director from a massive corporate firm, and she was hunting for a new challenge. She didn't just hand me a golden ticket. She tested my absolute limits to see if I would break. Evelyn tossed me the heavy brass keys to a trashed, 3,000 square foot industrial loft. I had a strict 48-hour deadline. Stage it beautifully with a $0 budget, she challenged, crossing her arms. Show me you can actually survive in this brutal industry. I didn't sleep for 2 full days. I pulled every favor I had ever earned. I dragged heavy, dusty vintage furniture clear across town in a rusty borrowed truck. My knuckles scraped against the door frames and I literally bled onto those cold floorboards. When Evelyn walked through the door on Monday morning, she didn't say a single word. She just walked the rooms, turned around and handed me her crisp business card. You have real talent, she told me later, slowly reviewing my worn portfolio. It is raw, totally unpolished, but it is real. Let me help you shape it. By 2012, armed with Evelyn's fierce mentorship and a heavy small business loan that took me 2 painful attempts to secure, I founded Haven House Designs. Our very first office was literally a converted broom closet in a shared downtown workspace. Fast forward to 2016, I had 10 loyal employees. Annual revenue hit $1.5 million. In 2020, Portland Monthly magazine ran a massive feature story on me. The glossy headline read, "From teen mom to design CEO, Gwen Miller's true story." The kind journalist spent 4 intense days interviewing me about my painful journey. I told her everything: the terrifying teenage pregnancy, being cruelly cut off from my wealthy family, losing Miles to a careless driver, building a $1 million business from absolute dirt. But I deliberately kept one huge secret. I never revealed my parents' real names or their city. I am not protecting them, I told myself. I am protecting Layla. I refused to let strangers connect my brilliant girl to the cold people who never wanted her to exist. By 2025, my company had 25 employees and pulled in over $5 million a year. I sat in a beautiful corner office overlooking the Pearl District. My amazing daughter was 21, a brilliant senior at Oregon State University majoring in psychology. She was fierce, independent, and everything I had prayed she would become. 22 long years. Not a single word, letter or phone call from the Miller family. Until last week, Wednesday, October 8, 2025. Exactly 7:15 p.m., I had just driven home from a massive client meeting. A tech executive was renovating her stunning waterfront property, and I had just locked in a huge contract. My brain was happily buzzing with colorful fabric samples and bright lighting options. Then I turned onto my quiet street. My heart completely stopped. No, it cannot be. Parked right in my driveway was a charcoal BMW 7 Series. It had Colorado license plates. I slammed on the brakes and sat perfectly still for a full minute, my knuckles turning bone white as I gripped the leather steering wheel. 2 familiar figures stood frozen on my front porch. The man had gray hair now, his previously proud shoulders slightly stooped. The woman still held herself with that terrifyingly rigid, perfect posture. I instantly remembered her constant, exhausting vigilance against anything that might stain her perfectly constructed world. Robert and Donna Miller. My parents. I hadn't seen their faces since the night they threw me into the freezing rain. "Run," a terrified teenage voice screamed in my head. I seriously considered throwing the car in reverse, driving to a hotel, calling Layla and pretending this nightmare wasn't happening. But then I looked at my own reflection in the rearview mirror. I was 39 years old. I owned a massive company. I had built a spectacular life entirely without their money. I absolutely refused to run. I stepped out of my car and marched straight toward them. My father spoke first, his voice gravelly. "Gwen, you look..." He paused, his sharp eyes rapidly scanning my expensive designer coat, my high-end leather bag, and my beautiful 2-story house. "Well, what are you doing here?" I demanded, skipping the fake politeness. My mother stepped forward into the porch light. Her face had deeper lines now. Her hair dyed a careful shade of ash blonde that didn't quite hide her age. "We know all about your son, Gwen," she said smoothly. "We know you have a son." I stared at her, utterly bewildered. "We would love to formally meet him," my father added, adjusting his expensive tie. "We would like to finally reconnect as a family." The pure absurdity of it nearly made me burst into hysterical laughter right there on the concrete. 22 years of dead silence. 22 years of pretending their youngest daughter was dead. And now, they drove 1,000 miles to stand on my porch, begging to meet a successful grandson they never bothered to know. A grandson who in reality did not even exist. But before I could slam the door in their faces, they made an offer so deeply twisted it threatened to drag me right back into their toxic web. I unlocked the front door and let them step inside my carefully curated sanctuary. I still do not fully understand why I turned the brass knob. Maybe a tiny fractured piece of my soul desperately needed to hear exactly what 22 years of suffocating silence had finally led to. My father slowly paced my living room like an arrogant inspector evaluating a distressed property for purchase. His calculating eyes ruthlessly assessed my gleaming hardwood floors, the expensive custom built-in shelves, and the vibrant original artwork hanging on my walls. My mother simply perched on the absolute edge of my plush sofa. Her pale hands were tightly folded in her lap, her spine locked straight as a steel rod. "You do not belong in this room," I thought, my chest tightening with sudden anger. "Miles built the foundation of this life. Not you. Your anniversary," I said flatly, breaking the thick, awkward tension. "That is exactly why you are here tonight. 40 years. My father almost cracked a genuine smile. "October 18th. We are hosting a massive celebration at the Grand Brown Palace Hotel. 250 elite guests. The city mayor will be attending, along with Pastor Hayes and the entire Rotary Club board. What does a fancy hotel party have to do with me?" I crossed my arms, completely refusing to offer them a drink or a seat. My mother nervously exchanged a loaded, anxious glance with my father. "There have been persistent questions, Gwen, about you, about what truly happened 22 years ago. People talk," my father added smoothly, straightening his expensive suit jacket. "A few old friends remember that we actually had a third child. They have started asking where you are. What exactly happened to you? We have always told everyone you simply moved away, that you went abroad to study. But lately the whispers have become much louder, much more aggressive. So you desperately need me to make a public appearance," I translated coldly, seeing right through the facade. "You want me to stand on a glittering stage and show everyone that the noble Miller family is completely whole and perfectly happy. We need your son." My mother's voice was suddenly iron firm. "We have proudly told our inner circle all about him, about our brilliant grandson. He absolutely should be there, standing tall, representing the bright next generation of our family legacy." The entire room went dead still. The air grew instantly heavy, pressing against my lungs. "Who exactly told you I have a son?" I demanded. "We read that magazine article." My father waved his wrinkled hand dismissively. "The business piece. They didn't even read it closely enough to know her gender. But it was not just the article, was it?" I pushed harder, my pulse pounding wildly in my throat. I completely refused to let them spin this neat little web. "Tell me the actual truth." My father's square jaw clenched so violently I honestly thought his teeth would shatter right in front of me. The polished mask finally slipped, revealing the terrified man beneath. "The law firm is rapidly hemorrhaging major clients, Gwen," he finally snapped. His arrogant voice dropped to a desperate, harsh whisper. "We desperately need a financial lifeline, a massive merger with Sterling Trust. But Arthur Sterling is an archaic, intensely conservative dinosaur who only invests his money in solid, multi-generational family legacies. I secretly hired a discount private investigator to track your whereabouts down." The fool skimmed some public records, found that glossy article, saw the word child, and immediately assumed son. To save the failing deal, I confidently told Arthur my brilliant grandson was the ultimate future of the Miller legacy. He took a ragged, heavy breath. "Your mother spent the last 6 months aggressively selling that ridiculous lie to the Rotary, the church, the entire city. She practically built a phantom heir out of thin air just to save us from total bankruptcy." "You have done so much better than we ever expected," my mother chimed in, offering a strained, desperate smile. "Better than we expected." The cruel words hit my stomach like a bowling ball. As if my entire agonizing struggle to survive was just a school test I might have lazily failed. "And if I simply refuse?" I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. My father's expression instantly hardened into stone. "Let us not make this horribly difficult, Gwen." He reached into his sleek leather briefcase and slowly withdrew a crisp blank check. The sheer sight of the expensive paper made my stomach violently turn. "We are fully prepared to compensate you for your time," he said smoothly, placing the check down onto my glass coffee table. $300,000. You simply bring your son to the anniversary party, stay for exactly 4 hours, take some nice family photos for the press, and then you can happily return to your little life. I stared blankly at the check, then shifted my gaze to my mother. She was nodding enthusiastically, acting as if this twisted bribery were the most reasonable business proposition in the entire world. $300,000. I repeated, my voice shaking with raw disgust. Is that exactly what 22 years of agonizing silence costs? We are also fully prepared to formally reinstate you in the primary family trust. My mother leaned forward, her tone dropping to a greedy conspiratorial whisper. The combined estate is currently valued at $4.5 million. You would finally have an equal share with Nolan and Clara. Money. It always comes back to dirty paper. I vividly thought about that freezing one-bedroom apartment directly above the noisy laundromat. The endless nights I had worked brutal double shifts while Layla slept in a cramped plastic playpen behind the sticky counter of a local coffee shop, simply because I couldn't afford a babysitter. The painful years I had spent building something beautiful from absolute dirt, while they sat comfortably in their massive Denver mansion, pretending their youngest child had never existed. And if I say no to your blood money? I challenged. My father's dark eyes narrowed dangerously. We would strongly prefer not to involve your son directly in this mess, Gwen. But if absolutely necessary, we can easily reach out to him ourselves. We can explain the unfortunate situation and kindly help him understand his true family history. It was a threat. Quiet, subtle, but completely unmistakable. You want to secretly contact my child? I said slowly, letting the horror sink deep into my bones. And tell them your completely twisted version of what happened to me. We just want to be a happy family again. My mother spread her pale hands, portraying the perfect picture of sweet reasonableness. Isn't that what you have always secretly wanted? I opened my mouth to scream them out of my house, but before a single sound could escape my throat, I heard the soft, familiar creak of footsteps on the wooden stairs behind me. Instantly, the oxygen sucked right out of the room. Mom? Is everything okay? Layla stopped at the bottom step. She held her thick psychology textbook in one hand, dressed comfortably in loose sweatpants and her faded Oregon State University hoodie. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy ponytail. She looked exactly like what she was, a normal, happy 21-year-old college student who had just paused her studying to check on her mother. My painful past and my beautiful present just collided in the exact same room. I quickly stepped sideways, physically positioning my body defensively between my daughter and the toxic ghosts from Denver. My mother slowly rose to her feet. Her heavily powdered face rapidly cycled through raw confusion, frantic calculation, and finally, something dangerously close to absolute horror. Who is this?" she stammered. "This is Layla," I declared, my voice echoing like a loud bell. "Your daughter?" My father's confident tone suddenly cracked, snapping in half. "But we were clearly told," the magazine article specifically said. "The article safely said child," I corrected him, staring straight into his panicked eyes. "You foolishly assumed the rest just to save your precious business deal." Layla's sharp gaze darted from my tense shoulders to the stiff, uncomfortable strangers invading our living room. I watched the exact second pure understanding dawned in her bright brown eyes. The air in the house completely shifted. "These are them," Layla stated, her voice dropping lower. "The grandparents who kicked you out into the freezing rain when you were pregnant with me?" My mother visibly flinched, stepping backward as if she had been physically slapped. "Now hold on. That is not— It was terribly complicated back then." "Which specific part was complicated?" Layla fired back, crossing her arms tightly. "The awful part where you threw a terrified 17-year-old onto the street? Or the cruel part where you spent 22 long years aggressively pretending she didn't exist?" "Young lady," my father warned, his harsh courtroom temper flaring up. "I am definitely not your young lady," Layla shot back fiercely. Though her brave chin was held high, I could clearly see her knuckles turning bright white. Her hands were visibly trembling. "I am the exact grandchild you never wanted to meet. The innocent baby you actively tried to make disappear. I know absolutely everything. Mom never hid a single truth from me. I know about the brutal disinheritance letter. I know about your fake inheritance papers. I know you shamelessly told your rich friends she simply went abroad." My parents stood frozen in stunned, suffocating silence. Layla turned to look at me, a sad, knowing expression on her face. "They drove all this way for a grandson, didn't they? A shiny trophy they could proudly show off to their elite friends." "Yes," I whispered. She turned back to face them, offering a remarkably cold, razor-sharp smile. "Surprise." My father recovered much faster than my mother did. I watched his brain mechanically recalibrate. The ruthless lawyer inside him immediately began assessing this unexpected new variable. "A granddaughter," he muttered carefully, rubbing his chin. That actually works just fine. We can simply adjust the public narrative. Layla can easily come to the hotel party as exactly what?" Layla interrupted loudly. "The dark, dirty secret you have been hiding for 2 decades. The unwanted daughter of the teen mom you practically threw into the garbage. We could sweetly say you were studying abroad all these years," my mother pleaded, her voice turning desperate. "Recently returned home. A beautiful surprise family reunion. I was born right here in Portland. I have never even left the country. I am a senior at OSU." Layla let out a dry, bitter laugh that held absolutely zero humor. Do you even hear the crazy things coming out of your mouths? You seriously want me to stand up and lie to 250 strangers about my entire existence? My father checked his shiny gold watch, acting as if the time was the only detail that actually mattered. The anniversary party is October 18th. That is exactly 12 days from now. We need a firm answer by the 12th. I stood up taller, pointing a stiff finger straight at my front door. I think you should leave my house right now. Gwen, please. I will deeply consider everything you have said, but absolutely not tonight. Not with Layla standing right here. My mother quickly grabbed her expensive designer handbag. Pausing right at the door, she turned back with a fake, sorrowful expression. This is a wonderful opportunity to heal, Gwen. To finally put the ugly past behind us. Do not let old silly wounds completely cost you your bright future. I stood on the porch and watched them march back to their sleek BMW. I watched my father politely help my mother into the passenger seat, doing it the exact same way he had 1,000 times before. He acted as if this were just another ordinary, boring Wednesday evening. When the taillights finally vanished around the dark corner, Layla spoke up. You are not actually considering this crazy deal, are you? I turned and looked at my brave daughter. This fierce, brilliant young woman I had raised entirely by myself. The incredible person Robert and Donna Miller had viciously tried to erase from the earth before she was even born. No, I answered honestly, but I am definitely not done with them yet. Later that night, long after Layla went to bed, I climbed into my dark closet and pulled out a heavy, fireproof lockbox. I hadn't touched the cold metal in years. Inside rested the physical documents of my forced erasure. I gently pulled out the notarized letter of total disinheritance. It was stamped October 11, 2002, signed in black ink by Robert Andrew Miller and Donna Elaine Miller, witnessed by a notary named Howard Bennett. I vividly remembered the awful day my father mailed it to me via certified mail, loudly requiring my signature. He wanted to make absolutely sure I knew exactly how thorough he had been. The 4-page document was packed with airtight legal language, coldly ensuring that Gwen Elaine Miller hereby forfeits all claims to the Miller family estate, and that the family bore zero moral obligation to me, or, I quote, any dependence thereof. Any dependence thereof. Layla. Reduced to 3 heartless words in a legal file, erased before she even took her first breath. But there was a second item buried in the box. Something I hadn't dared to look at since the terrible week Miles died. My fingers trembled as I pulled out a crumpled, heavily taped together piece of thick bank paper. It was a certified cashier's check from Miller & Partners, dated October 15, 2002. Exactly 4 days after they kicked me out. It was made directly out to Miles Warren, for $50,000. Written proudly across the front, in my father's sharp, unforgiving handwriting, were 3 brutal sentences. Leave town. Leave my daughter. The money is yours. Miles had ripped the massive check into 4 jagged pieces. He never took a single shiny dime. He never even told me my wealthy parents secretly tried to buy his loyalty. Instead, he quietly endured endless, back-breaking double shifts at a dirty repair shop just to protect my fragile, broken heart from knowing how truly toxic my own parents were. Tears finally blurred my vision. I carefully photographed every single page with my phone. I uploaded them to my secure cloud storage and made extra backup copies. Mom? I quickly looked up. Layla was standing silently in my bedroom doorway, her arms wrapped tightly around her stomach. I couldn't sleep either, she whispered. She walked over and sat softly beside me on the mattress. Her eyes scanned the damning document spread across my thick comforter. Is that the awful letter? Yes. And the check. She picked up the first page, reading the harsh legal words very slowly. When she finally finished, her dark eyes were swimming with angry tears she absolutely refused to let fall. They really did it, she whispered, her voice cracking with fresh pain. They really just cut you out like you were nothing but trash. They did. What are you going to do with all of these? I looked deeply at my amazing daughter. Then I stared at the undeniable physical evidence of 22 years of calculated cruelty laid out on my bed. I really do not know yet, I admitted softly. But whatever I decide to do, they will never be able to pretend anymore. Layla nodded slowly, a fierce protective spark suddenly igniting in her brown eyes. Well, she murmured, I might have an idea. The very next morning, the golden sunlight spilled across my kitchen counter, bringing a tiny shred of warmth to my freezing hands. I stared at my glowing phone screen. I was about to make a call I hadn't dared to make in over a year. My finger trembled as I dialed the old Denver area code. Miriam Taylor answered on the second ring. Gwen? Is that you, sweetheart? Mrs. Taylor? I managed a fragile smile despite the heavy knot in my stomach. I hope I am not calling too early. At my age, early is a highly relative term. She chuckled warmly, but her tone quickly shifted, sensing my unease. What is wrong, honey? You sound like you are carrying the entire weight of the world on your shoulders. I took a deep breath and spilled everything. I told her about my parents' sudden ambush, the imaginary grandson they had shamelessly invented, the upcoming Ruby anniversary party, and the insulting $300,000 bribe. When I finally finished speaking, the line went dead quiet for a long, agonizing moment. Those terrible people, she finally hissed, her voice vibrating with genuine disgust. 22 years, and they haven't changed one single bit. Mrs. Taylor, I need to ask you something important. I swallowed the massive lump in my throat. That awful night, October 11th, 2002. I remember it like it was yesterday, she interrupted, her tone hardening into pure steel. I watched right from my living room window. I saw you standing in the freezing rain, that sad little suitcase sitting at your wet feet. I watched your parents' expensive car drive away. I should have marched out there sooner, Gwen. I have deeply regretted that hesitation every single day since. I wasn't crazy, my mind whispered, relief washing over my tired brain. It really happened exactly how I remember. Do you happen to still have your security camera footage from back then? A brief pause. You know, I never delete anything. It is an old-school teacher's habit. Document absolutely everything. Let me check my digital files. 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed brightly with a new email. I opened the attachment, and my breath hitched. It was a grainy but completely unmistakable black and white image. A terrified 17-year-old girl standing alone on a dark concrete porch, soaked in the rain. 8:32 p.m., October 11th, 2002. The glowing digital timestamp was perfectly visible in the bottom corner. The grand address of my parents' mansion was partially framed in the shot. That is you, Mrs. Taylor stated firmly when I immediately called her back. That is the exact night they threw you away like yesterday's trash. Would you be willing to verify this officially if I ever needed you to? Honey, I have been eagerly waiting 22 years for someone to finally ask me, she declared fiercely. Whatever you need to do, I am standing right beside you. I thanked her profusely and hung up. 2 solid pieces of physical evidence. 2 reliable witnesses. Now I desperately needed a bulletproof plan. I spent that quiet evening alone in my home office, rereading my own painful story. The Portland Monthly article was still floating around online, having been shared over 15,000 times since it was originally published in May 20. The kind journalist, Rachel Harding, had titled it, From Teen Mom to Design CEO, Gwen Miller's True Story. 3,000 words about deep loss, stubborn resilience, and building a beautiful castle from the broken ruins of everything you thought you knew. I had been so incredibly careful during that interview. I had told the honest truth, but not the whole truth. I casually mentioned being permanently estranged from my family without ever naming their identities or their home city. Not to protect their fragile reputation, but to fiercely guard Layla from strangers dredging up a painful history that simply didn't belong to them. Now my tired eyes scrolled rapidly through the sprawling comment section. Thousands of messages. This woman is incredible. Imagine being completely thrown away by your own blood and still becoming this successful. Someone should make a movie about her inspiring life. Then, one specific comment caught my eye, stopping my heart cold. It was posted just 3 short weeks ago. Does anyone know if she is secretly related to the Miller family over in Denver? The wealthy law firm people? Someone in my church casually mentioned it, and now I am super curious. There it is. I realized, a cold chill sliding down my spine. That is exactly how my parents found my hiding spot. A single internet comment unraveled 2 decades of safety. My phone suddenly rang, shattering the quiet room. Evelyn Vaughn. Gwen, I heard through the busy grapevine that your rich parents magically materialized after 2 decades of radio silence. I let out a dry, exhausted laugh. News travels incredibly fast in Portland. Her sharp tone instantly softened into a motherly warmth. What do you need right now? Advice? A new perspective? A shovel? I don't know yet. I sighed heavily, rubbing my aching temples. What I do know, Evelyn said slowly, measuring every single word, is that you have spent 22 grueling years proving exactly who you are without their dirty money. Do not let 4 fake hours at their fancy party undo your beautiful reality. She was absolutely right, but my racing brain was already thinking much bigger than a 4-hour smile. Thursday, October 10th, 2025, 4:15 p.m. I was standing in my bustling design office, surrounded by expensive fabric swatches and massive architectural blueprints. My desk phone lit up with a Colorado area code I didn't recognize. I almost let it ring through to the voicemail box, but then, my front receptionist buzzed the intercom frantically. "Gwen, there are 2 frantic people out here aggressively pushing past my desk." My heavy office door violently swung open. Standing right there, breathless, pale, and trembling under the bright fluorescent lights, were my older brother and sister. "Gwen, it is Nolan." I hadn't heard my brother's actual voice in 22 long years. It was much deeper now, heavily weathered by time and stress. The voice of a tired man in his late 40s, instead of the golden 24-year-old medical student who had cowardly watched from a warm upstairs window while I shivered in the storm. "Nolan," I whispered, utterly paralyzed. "Clara." "I know," Nolan exhaled shakily, holding his hands up in surrender. "I know I have absolutely zero right to call you or just show up at your job like this. I know you have zero reason to ever speak to me again, but I desperately need you to know some ugly things before whatever happens next." "Why now?" I gripped the edge of my polished desk to steady my trembling knees. "Then talk." "The fake grandson story," Nolan began, his eyes darting guiltily around my office. "The whole insane lie about you having a brilliant son, that entirely came from Mom. She read your Portland Monthly article 3 years ago, but she didn't read it carefully. She just saw the word child, and your massively successful business, and she mentally constructed this whole ridiculous narrative about you raising a boy who became a young entrepreneur." I stared at him, feeling physically ill. "She literally invented a grandson out of thin air." Nolan's voice cracked with shame. "She proudly told her rich church friends, the snobby Rotary Club. She built an entire fictional story about this brilliant young man continuing the proud Miller legacy, and Dad eagerly went along with the scam. They have been dining out on your imaginary son for months to save the firm." I tightly closed my eyes. Even now, even after everything that had happened, my parents' endless capacity for sickening delusions still managed to stun me. "Why are you secretly telling me this today?" I demanded. "Because I was a pathetic coward." Nolan stepped closer, breathing hard. "Gwen, 22 years ago, I should have marched downstairs. I should have screamed at them. I should have stood between you and that door. Clara and I have painfully talked about it for years. We were horribly wrong, and now, I just want to finally make it right, whatever that looks like." Nolan paused, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead. "The grand anniversary party. Clara and I will both be there. If you actually decide to come, I swear you will not stand alone." I honestly didn't know what to say to that. He talked for another emotional hour. He painfully outlined the unwritten, suffocating rules of surviving as a Miller child. The crushing expectations, the constant exhausting performance, the sick way our parents wielded their conditional approval like a loaded weapon, freely granting it to those who blindly obeyed, and ruthlessly destroying anyone who dared to step out of line. Clara suddenly broke down. She began sobbing violently right there in the middle of my office, her perfect polished facade shattering into a million pieces. "Dad is threatening to ruin us, Gwen," she wept hysterically, gripping her expensive leather purse until her pale knuckles turned bright white. "When he realized you might actually say no to his bribe, he pulled me aside. He told me that if I ever dared to speak to you, he would instantly cut my 2 young children out of the family trust. He constantly uses his wealth like a choking dog leash. He always has." "Then why didn't you ever try to reach out in 22 years? I asked softly, my heart aching for the terrified little girl hiding inside this grown woman. A long, heavy pause swallowed the room. Nolan refused to look away, fresh tears finally spilling over his weathered cheeks. "I almost did," he confessed, his voice dropping to a jagged whisper. 6 years ago, I secretly found your business number online. I dialed it at least 10 different times." He swallowed hard, and every single time I hung up in a panic before it connected, because I knew that if I finally heard your voice, I would have to look in the mirror and admit the monster I let myself become. I wasn't ready to face my own guilt. "So what changed today?" "Watching them drive to your house, demanding to rent a grandson that doesn't exist," Nolan exhaled bitterly. "Watching them casually try to buy your forgiveness like you are just a cheap prop for their anniversary photos. It made me realize, if I do not stand up and speak right now, I never will. And I will spend the rest of my miserable life knowing I failed my baby sister twice." I quietly studied the broken brother I remembered, the gentle boy who used to play board games with me when our parents abandoned us for charity galas, the one who patiently taught me how to ride a red bicycle in the backyard dirt. "There is one more thing you absolutely need to know," Nolan added, his tone turning dead serious. The anniversary party on Saturday. There is going to be a massive family moment that gets legally live-streamed directly onto the Good Shepherd Church Facebook page. Pastor Hayes strongly suggested it as a beautiful show of unity for the entire congregation. A live stream, 250 elite witnesses sitting in the room, and who knows how many thousands more eagerly watching online. Thank you for warning me, Nolan, I said quietly. What are you going to do? I am not entirely sure yet, I murmured, a sudden sharp clarity piercing through the fog in my brain, but I am definitely starting to see the picture clearly. Friday, October 11th, 2025, exactly 11:05 a.m. My cell phone rang loudly. It was my father calling me directly this time. No polite preamble, no fake greetings. Gwen, we are rapidly running out of time. The grand party is in exactly 1 week. $300,000 cash, and full reinstatement in the family trust. This is my absolute final offer. I have been speaking with Nolan, I replied, keeping my voice dangerously calm. Dead silence on the other end. He told me everything about the fake grandson story you have been desperately selling. I continued smoothly. The beautiful lie you completely made up because Mom couldn't be bothered to read a magazine article carefully. That is not. We may have embellished the details slightly, he stammered, his confident lawyer persona cracking under the pressure. You completely invented a human being, Dad. You have been loudly bragging to your wealthy friends about a successful grandson for months. A boy that absolutely does not exist. Gwen. My father's tone instantly hardened into his familiar icy rage. I do not appreciate your disrespectful tone. After everything generous we are generously offering. What exactly are you offering me? I snapped back, feeling the chains of my childhood finally snapping off my wrists. Dirty money to make me perform like a trained monkey for your snobby friends. A tiny spot in a legal trust you maliciously used to erase me from the earth. I took a sharp breath, leaning into the phone. You are not offering me a single thing. You are just desperately trying to buy your cowardly way out of a massive lie you created. You have absolutely no right to judge us. He roared, finally losing his temper. You are the ungrateful child who destroyed this family. You are the one who brought endless shame to our perfect name. I was a 17-year-old child. I screamed back, 22 years of buried agony finally erupting from my chest. I was terrified and pregnant, and I desperately needed my parents. And you threw me into the freezing rain like garbage and spent 2 decades pretending I died. If you dare to miss this party, Gwen, you will never ever have another opportunity to be a part of this family again. You promised me that exact same thing 22 years ago. I whispered, feeling incredibly powerful for the very first time in my life. And you know what? I built a much better, beautiful life entirely without you. We will see about that, he snarled viciously. Then the line went dead. I sat perfectly still in my quiet office, my heart hammering a violent rhythm against my ribs. My tired mind raced 1,000,000 miles an hour. 1 week, 250 elite guests, 1 massive public live stream. It was finally time to stop letting those monsters comfortably control the narrative of my life. That rainy evening, I sat around my warm dining table with Layla and Evelyn. The soft golden glow of the pendant lights felt safe, the complete opposite of the freezing conditional world of my childhood. They desperately want a performance, Evelyn noted, slowly swirling the dark red wine in her glass. They want you to magically show up, paste a fake grateful smile on for the flashing cameras, and blindly validate 22 years of their sickening lies. They just want to use you, Layla added, her young jaw set tightly with anger. Exactly the same way they have always used you. As a messy problem to carefully manage, not a real human being to actually love. I looked closely at both of them, my fierce, brilliant mentor, my brave, beautiful daughter. This is the real family I built from absolute dirt, I realized, a fresh wave of strength rushing into my veins. I am going to that party, I announced softly. Layla's head snapped up in shock. Mom, no. Not to blindly give them what they want, I clarified, a burning fire finally igniting in my chest. To finally give myself exactly what I need. I pulled out my phone and slid it across the wooden table, proudly showing them the digital photos of the cruel disinheritance letter, Mrs. Taylor's grainy security footage, and the famous magazine article. They have spent 2 entire decades ruthlessly controlling my painful story, boldly telling their wealthy friends I went abroad, shamelessly inventing a fake grandson, actively making me disappear from the earth. And you want to publicly undisappear? Evelyn asked slowly, a proud, sharp smirk touching her lips. I want to boldly tell the absolute truth, I stated, my hands finally stopping their nervous shaking, right in front of everyone who truly matters to them, on their shiny stage, at their expensive party, during their precious live stream. I took a deep, shaky breath, not to cruelly humiliate them, but to permanently stop letting them pretend I do not exist. Then I am coming with you, Layla declared, her voice firm as solid rock. They need to look right into my eyes and see exactly who I really am, not their imaginary golden grandson. Me. I reached across the table and squeezed her warm hand. Are you absolutely sure? This could get incredibly ugly. I have spent my entire life knowing my grandparents easily chose their fake reputation over my literal existence, she said bravely. I am sure. I nervously called Nolan late that night. Your brave offer to stand with me. Does it still hold? Clara and I talked for hours. His tired voice crackled through the speaker. We are fully ready. Then I need you to do one crucial thing. Do not warn Mom and Dad. Do not breathe a single word that I am coming. Can you do that? Yes. Good. I hung up the phone and looked out at the glittering Portland skyline. In exactly 1 week we are going to teach the Miller family what loyalty actually means. Saturday, October 18th, 2025. Exactly 7:30 p.m. The grand lobby of the Brown Palace Hotel was everything my snobby parents would have proudly chosen. Huge, dripping crystal chandeliers hung from the painted ceiling. Crisp white tablecloths were starched to absolute perfection. The extravagant floral arrangements scattered around the room probably cost way more than my very first month's rent. 250 wealthy guests drifted around in formal evening attire, eagerly clutching sparkling champagne flutes, making boring small talk about golf handicaps and rich investment portfolios. I stood quietly in the arched entrance with my amazing daughter right beside me. Layla wore a stunning hunter green dress, simple but incredibly elegant. I had deliberately chosen a sharp charcoal gray suit, professional, understated, utterly impossible to ignore. Are you okay? She whispered, sensing my sudden physical tension. I am about to dramatically crash my parents' ruby anniversary party and tell 250 rich strangers they have been lying for 2 decades. I squeezed her hand tight. I am terrified. That is not what I asked, Layla replied softly, staring directly into my eyes. I looked at this incredible young woman. She had grown up fully knowing her own grandparents tried to erase her from history, yet she built her own incredible strength from that heavy knowledge instead of letting it break her spirit. Yeah, I breathed out, standing up much taller. I am okay. We confidently started walking in, but right before we could reach the heavy brass double doors of the main ballroom, a large aggressive hand suddenly clamped down hard onto my left shoulder. I violently spun around to face Marcus Vance. He was my father's ruthless junior partner, the law firm's ultimate cold-blooded fixer. He was immediately flanked by 2 broad, muscular hotel security guards. Gwen, Marcus said smoothly, his dark eyes dead, cold and entirely empty. He forcefully slid a sleek silver metal briefcase right onto a tall cocktail table next to us. It loudly popped open with a heavy metallic click. Inside were thick, tightly banded stacks of crisp $100 bills. Blood money. $500,000 in completely untraceable cash, Marcus murmured, his tone dripping with arrogant poison. Compliments of the firm. Take it. Turn right around. Walk out that revolving door right now, and nobody has to get publicly humiliated tonight. Before I could even react, Layla boldly stepped right into Marcus's personal space, not flinching a single inch. My mother is not for sale, she hissed venomously, and if your hired goons dare to touch us again, I will start screaming kidnapping right here in this crowded lobby. The 2 giant security guards nervously exchanged an uncertain look, quickly stepping backward. Marcus's rigid jaw twitched with silent fury. I reached out, grabbed the heavy silver briefcase, slammed it violently shut, and shoved it hard right into Marcus's chest. Keep your dirty money, Marcus, I growled, feeling my adrenaline completely redlining. We are going in. We pushed past his shocked face, our hearts hammering a frantic rhythm in our chests. And I reached out to pull the polished brass handles of the grand ballroom doors wide open, stepping straight into the blinding spotlight of the Lion's Den. The massive ballroom was absolutely blinding. Golden light poured from the dripping crystal chandeliers, casting long dramatic shadows across the polished dance floor. A raised velvet-draped platform stood at the far end, acting as an elegant altar for my parents' massive egos. A professional camera crew was hurriedly setting up the heavy equipment for Good Shepherd Church. A tiny red light blinked rapidly on the main lens. The Facebook Live indicator was already broadcasting to the world, and there they were, Robert and Donna Miller. They stood proudly on that glittering stage, completely surrounded by wealthy well-wishers. My mother looked radiant in a custom ivory silk gown. My father wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. They were glowing with the smug, arrogant confidence of people who truly believed they had permanently won at life. They hadn't noticed our quiet arrival yet. The enormous room was entirely too crowded. The collective attention laser-focused on the happy couple. But slowly, heads near the heavy entrance doors began to turn. "Is that someone else?" a woman whispered loudly, her diamond earrings sparkling under the lights. "The successful daughter from the magazine," a man muttered back. The nervous whispers spread through the room like rapid ripples in a dark pond. And then, my mother looked up. Her glowing ivory smile instantly froze, shattering into a mask of pure terror. I watched her pale, manicured hand tighten into a desperate death grip on my father's tailored arm. He slowly followed her panicked gaze, stopping his grand speech dead mid-sentence. He had just been saying, 40 beautiful years of marriage has deeply taught me that family is absolutely everything. Donna and I have happily built our entire lives around that core principle. Our wonderful children, our supportive community, our strong faith, family is everything. My brain screamed, "You threw your own flesh and blood into the garbage." His hypocritical words echoed across the silent ballroom, powerfully amplified by the speakers permanently captured by the live stream camera. 250 elite faces watched adoringly on the small monitor near the stage steps. I could literally see the scrolling comments flashing brightly. "Beautiful couple. God bless the Miller family. What an incredible inspiration." My father tried to recover. He nervously cleared his dry throat. "As I was saying, family has always." I didn't wait for him to finish the lie. I started walking straight toward the bright stage. The wealthy crowd magically parted. It wasn't wildly dramatic like a movie, but people instinctively stepped aside, deeply sensing that a massive, uncontrollable storm was about to hit. Layla walked proudly right beside me, her beautiful chin held high, her steps perfectly steady. Nolan appeared at the edge of the silent crowd. Clara stood bravely beside him. They didn't try to stop my approach. They just watched, silently keeping their solemn promise. "Gwen," my father's voice came through the towering speakers, heavily strained and shaking now. "What a wonderful surprise. We certainly weren't expecting." I climbed the 3 carpeted steps to the platform. The blinking camera smoothly tracked my every movement. I could physically feel 250 pairs of burning eyes locked directly onto me, plus thousands more watching from their living rooms. "Hello, Dad." I reached out and firmly took the microphone straight from his trembling hand before he could even react. I turned to face the sea of shocked guests. "Hello, everyone. My name is Gwen Miller. For those of you who do not know me, and I am sure many of you don't, I am Robert and Donna's youngest daughter." I paused, letting the heavy words hang in the freezing air. "The one they proudly told you went to Europe 22 years ago." The silence in that grand ballroom became absolute, suffocating dead space. "I never went to Europe," I continued smoothly, my voice ringing clear and strong. "On October 11, 2002, exactly 22 years ago tomorrow, my parents discovered I was pregnant at 17. That exact same night, they threw me out of their house into the freezing rain. They immediately had their law firm draft legal papers disowning me. They looked me in the eye and told me I was dead to them." Someone in the front row audibly gasped. The live stream monitor was absolutely exploding. Comments scrolled faster than the human eye could read. User DenverMom88. "OMG, did she just say 17 and pregnant?" User Rotary Steve. "Wait, Robert threw his own child out? I thought she lived in Paris." User Truthseeker. "This is insane. Keep watching." They shamelessly told this entire town I had simply gone abroad. For 2 decades they pretended I didn't exist. I reached into my leather bag and slowly pulled out the thick, notarized letter. This is the actual legal document my father mailed me 4 days after abandoning me. It clearly states that I forfeit all inheritance rights, and that the Miller family bears zero moral obligation to me or, and I quote, "any dependents thereof." I held the stiff paper up directly to the blinking camera lens, close enough for the internet to read the harsh ink. "Those dependents? That is my amazing daughter, Layla." I gestured gracefully to where she stood proudly at the edge of the stage. "Your own flesh and blood granddaughter, who you have never even bothered to meet. The brilliant grandson you have been loudly telling your Rotary friends about for months? He doesn't exist. You completely invented him based on a magazine article you didn't even read carefully." My father lunged forward, desperately grabbing for the microphone. "Gwen, this is absolutely not the right place for this." "When is the right place, Dad?" I easily stepped back, holding the mic out of his frantic reach. When is the perfect time to finally tell the truth? You secretly drove to my house last week, offering me $300,000 to parade a fictional boy at this exact party. Bribe money to make your pathetic lie look real. I turned back to the stunned crowd. I did not come here tonight for your dirty money. I came here because I am completely done being erased. Pastor Hayes stepped forward, his face pale with horror. Robert, is this horrific story true? My father couldn't form a single word. My mother suddenly started sobbing. I had only seen Donna Miller cry once in my entire childhood. Now, thick black mascara streamed down her cheeks, totally ruining her perfect makeup. Robert, Pastor Hayes repeated, his tone stern and unyielding. I asked you a direct question. Is what your youngest daughter saying true? The enormous room held its collective breath. My father frantically scanned the crowd. The angry mayor, the disgusted board members, the church elders who had blindly respected him for decades. I watched his desperate brain calculate, searching for a clever legal excuse. He couldn't find one. It was a highly difficult time, he finally mumbled, looking at the floor. We made some harsh decisions that, you threw me out because I was pregnant, I interrupted, keeping my voice chillingly steady. Because your precious reputation mattered much more than your own freezing child. Suddenly Nolan stepped firmly onto the stage, then Clara followed. They stood bravely right beside me. She is telling the absolute truth, Nolan declared, his deep voice carrying without a microphone. Clara and I were both there that awful night. We cowardly watched from an upstairs window while our parents put our teenage sister out into a storm. We never said a single word. That was our greatest failure. The quiet whispers in the room morphed into a deafening roar. People were wildly pulling out cell phones, texting, recording everything. The city mayor was already marching toward the exit in pure disgust. And Mrs. Taylor, I said into the mic, pointing toward a gray-haired woman sitting proudly in the back row. Our former neighbor from 22 years ago. She saw absolutely everything. She has time-stamped security photos. Miriam Taylor stood up tall, her chin lifted defiantly. I watched that terrified child stand in the freezing rain for 15 minutes before she finally walked away. I gave her a warm place to sleep. The wealthy Miller family never once bothered to ask where she went. The internet feed was melting down. This is sickening. Someone call the local news. User lawyer up. I am pulling all my legal accounts from Miller and Partners tomorrow morning. Disgusting. They were utterly destroyed, but as I turned to hand the microphone back to the man who ruined my childhood, I realized my revenge was only half finished, and the final blow was going to come from Layla. I slowly handed the heavy black microphone back to my father. He took it automatically, his fingers numb, staring blankly like a man who had just stepped on a hidden landmine. I didn't come here tonight to destroy you, I said quietly, pitching my voice so only those standing on the stage could hear the raw truth. I came here to simply stop being invisible. Then I turned my back on his pale, shocked face. I looked directly out at the whispering crowd and raised my voice one last time. I am definitely not asking for your pity. I do not need it. 22 years ago, I was tossed into the freezing rain with absolutely nothing. Today, I proudly own a thriving design company in Portland. I manage 25 loyal employees and generate over $5 million in annual revenue. My beautiful daughter is a brilliant senior at Oregon State University. We successfully built our entire lives from scratch, without a single drop of the Miller family's help. I stared straight into the blinking red lens of the live stream camera. Let the whole world see this, I thought. I am not standing here for cheap revenge. I am here because last week, my parents desperately tried to buy my silence. $300,000 to blindly pretend their lies were real. I am here because 2 decades ago, they secretly tried to pay Layla's hardworking father $50,000 to abandon us when I was just a terrified 17-year-old girl. He tore their dirty check into pieces and worked himself into an early grave to protect us. Tears pricked my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I am here because they finally deserve to face the harsh consequences of what they did. Not hidden behind closed doors, but right in front of the elite community they value so much more than their own children. Layla stepped forward, her green dress catching the golden light. She reached out and gently took my trembling hand. I am Layla, she announced clearly into the microphone. The exact granddaughter they never wanted. I am 21 years old. I have known my entire life that my grandparents easily chose their fake reputation over my mother, and by extension over me. She turned her head and looked directly into Robert and Donna's terrified eyes. You could have actually known me, Layla said, her voice cracking with years of inherited pain. You could have proudly watched me grow up. You could have been sitting in the front row at my birthday parties, my messy school plays, my high school graduation. She wiped a single tear from her cheek. But you chose not to, and now you do not get to pretend that your empty life was ever our fault. Layla shoved the microphone back onto the podium and confidently walked off the stage. I followed right behind her. Behind us, the grand ballroom instantly erupted into total, deafening chaos. When we reached the heavy brass doors, I stopped and turned back one final time. My strong voice sliced right through the frantic shouting. "One more thing," I yelled. "I am not going to sue you. I am not going to contest the family will or demand a single penny. The cruel disinheritance papers you happily signed 22 years ago. I am keeping them permanently locked away as a daily reminder of exactly who you are, not as a weapon." My father looked up, genuine confusion crossing his wrinkled face. He had fully expected a brutal legal battle. He understood lawsuits and demands. He did not understand mercy. "But you need to understand this," I warned fiercely. "If you ever dare to spread lies about me or my daughter again, if you ever try to contact Layla without her strict permission, or spin some new pathetic story for your country club friends, I will immediately make every single document I own public. I have the horrible disinheritance letter. I have the torn $50,000 bribe check. I have time-stamped photos of a freezing teenager. I have witnesses." I nodded respectfully toward Mrs. Taylor in the back row. "And now I have 250 live witnesses to this exact conversation." Evelyn Vaughn suddenly appeared right at my elbow, a fiercely proud smile on her face. "Ready to go?" "Yes." As we pushed through the doors, leaving the toxic Miller empire behind forever, I heard Pastor Hayes's deep voice booming over the speakers. "Robert, Donna, I believe we need to speak privately in my office tonight." Layla tightly squeezed my hand as we finally stepped out into the crisp October evening. The chilly air tasted incredibly clean. For the first time in 22 agonizing years, I felt like my lungs could fully expand. This is what true freedom breathes like. "Mom?" Layla's voice was small, shaking slightly as the adrenaline faded. "Did we do the right thing?" I thought about that scared, soaking wet 17-year-old girl standing on a concrete porch, clutching a tiny suitcase and a baby she hadn't planned for. I thought about the endless, exhausting years of surviving, fighting, and slowly building myself into someone truly worth being. "We told the absolute truth," I said softly, wrapping my arm around her warm shoulders. "We drew a massive boundary. We simply let them face the fiery consequences of their own selfish choices." I pulled her into a tight, safe hug. "That is not revenge, sweetie. That is just pure justice." "So what happens now?" she whispered against my coat. I looked up at the sparkling night sky, a genuine smile spreading across my tired face. "Now we finally go home." The explosive fallout began within hours. By midnight, the shocking live stream clip had been shared over 900 times. By Sunday morning, that massive number had tripled. A stranger had downloaded the footage, titled it "Woman Exposes Parents' 22-Year Lie at Their Own Anniversary Party," and uploaded it directly to YouTube. It instantly racked up 50,000 views in just 12 hours. 55 wealthy guests had physically walked out of the hotel party within 45 minutes of my dramatic exit. I learned this juicy detail from Nolan, who called me Sunday afternoon with a full, breathless report. The city mayor walked straight out without even saying goodbye to my father. The powerful church board quickly followed. The Harrisons, the rich couple who owned the local auto dealerships, had actually stopped Nolan on their way to the valet, just to sincerely apologize for blindly accepting the fake story all these years. By Sunday evening, a short, devastating item appeared in the Denver Post. The polite headline read, "Local Attorney's Grand Anniversary Gala Ends in Shocking Family Revelation." The journalist kept the tone carefully neutral, but the fiery comment section certainly did not. "I sat in church with these monsters every Sunday. What kind of sick man throws a pregnant child onto the street? Anyone who watched that tragic video will never look at the Miller family the same way again." By Monday morning, Robert officially resigned his prestigious position as a leading elder at Good Shepherd Church. The printed bulletin politely stated it was for personal reasons, but the entire congregation knew the ugly truth. By Wednesday, the elite Rotary Club publicly announced they were reviewing their strict membership criteria. Robert's name was heavily implied, and through all the dramatic chaos happening in Denver, I was sitting peacefully in my sunny Portland office, happily answering emails from eager new clients. 7 massive inquiries came in that very week. People had seen my old magazine article years ago, recently connected it to the viral video, and wanted to hire the woman who refused to break. Some massive fallouts destroy you. Others simply clarify who you are. Mine beautifully did both. The following Thursday, Rachel Harding, the kind journalist from Portland Monthly, called my cell phone. "Gwen, I do not know if you have checked the internet lately, but your brave video is literally everywhere," she said excitedly. "We would deeply love to do a massive follow-up piece." The CEO who finally confronted her past. "What do you think?" I leaned back in my leather chair, staring out at the beautiful city I conquered. "Let me think about it and get back to you." "Of course. Just know the public response has been totally overwhelming. Thousands of people are connecting with your pain. So many of them have suffered similar toxic experiences." She wasn't wrong. My company's general inbox was entirely flooded with crying messages. They weren't about modern interior design. They were about broken families, about being cruelly cut off, about spending decades feeling utterly invisible, and finally finding the brave courage to speak up. "Your amazing video made me call my estranged brother for the first time in a decade. I am a struggling teen mom too, and you gave me so much hope today. Thank you for beautifully showing that massive success is the best possible response to people who tried to destroy you." On Saturday afternoon, I drove to the airport. I excitedly flew Nolan and Clara up to Portland for their very first visit to my home in 22 years. We sat comfortably in my warm living room, the exact same room where our parents had aggressively tried to buy my silence just 2 weeks earlier, and we talked for 5 healing hours. Nolan openly wept, telling me about the crushing years of secret guilt that ate him alive. Clara sobbed loudly when she finally hugged Layla for the very first time. Their sweet children, my bright-eyed niece and nephew, ages 7 and 10, happily played tag in my grassy backyard while the adults slowly tried to rebuild a bridge from the smoky wreckage. "I am so incredibly sorry," Nolan whispered, staring into his coffee mug. "I know it is nowhere near enough. I know a simple apology doesn't magically cover 2 decades of pain." "No," I agreed softly, offering a gentle smile. "It doesn't, but it is a really beautiful start." Layla quietly watched us from the kitchen doorway. This fierce young woman, who had grown up entirely without an extended family, was finally seeing what it might actually look like to have one. It was messy, deeply imperfect, and highly complicated, but it was real. Exactly 1 week after the disastrous party, my phone vibrated on the counter. A Colorado number. My mother. "Gwen?" Her voice was incredibly fragile, smaller than I had ever heard it in my entire life. "I am not calling to officially apologize. I honestly do not know how to even begin apologizing for the terrible things we did." "Then why are you calling?" I asked, my tone guarded but calm. A long, trembling silence stretched across the line. "I watched the internet video," she finally whispered, her breath hitching. "The live stream from the party. I have watched it 15 different times." Another painful pause. "I keep pausing the screen. I keep looking deeply at your face when you are talking, desperately trying to see my little girl. The sweet one." I said nothing. "You cannot undo the storm just because you finally feel the cold. Your father is—" She trailed off, a wet sniffle echoing through the phone. "He is really not doing well, Gwen. The angry church, the silent Rotary Club, his disgusted law colleagues. Everyone is looking at him with such intense pity and disgust now. He honestly doesn't know how to handle the shame. I didn't do this to cruelly punish him, Mom. Or you." "I know," she sobbed softly. "I finally know that now. You bravely did it because you just had to stop pretending. You did it because we gave you absolutely no other choice." "Why did you call, Mom?" The longest, heaviest silence yet. "Because I desperately wanted to hear your voice," she cried, her polished armor finally cracking completely. "Because I haven't heard it in 22 long years. And I suddenly realized, sitting in this massive empty house, that I might never ever hear it again." She took a jagged breath. "Because my beautiful granddaughter stood on a public stage and boldly told 200 strangers she spent her whole life knowing we didn't want her, and my chest hurts so badly I cannot breathe." I tightly closed my eyes, a single tear escaping down my cheek. The tragedy of her realization was incredibly heavy. "I am definitely not ready to forgive you," I said honestly. "I might never be ready, but I am not going to hang up on you either. That is so much more than I deserve." She wept. "Yes, it is." We quietly stayed on the open line for another full minute, just listening to each other breathe. Then, she softly said goodbye. She didn't arrogantly ask for another chance. She didn't demand a single thing. Maybe that was genuine progress. Or maybe it was just the very first agonizing step of a remarkably long, rocky road. Christmas 2025. My long dining table. the worn wooden one I had bought 4 years ago from a cheap estate sale and happily refinished myself, comfortably seated 14 people. It had never been this beautifully full. Layla sat beaming at my right hand. Evelyn Vaughn, laughing warmly, sat at my left. Mrs. Taylor, who had happily flown up from Denver again, was patiently teaching my young nephew how to neatly fold his cloth napkin into a swan. Nolan proudly carved the golden, steaming turkey while his wife set out the warm side dishes. Clara's bright-eyed daughters were playfully arguing about who got the honor of lighting the festive candles. My parents weren't there. We hadn't reached that miraculous point of healing yet. And honestly, maybe we never would. But looking around that glowing, noisy table, I finally realized something profoundly beautiful. I had spent 22 long years secretly mourning a fake family that had never really wanted me. Now I was completely surrounded by wonderful people who actively chose to be here. People who desperately wanted to know me. Not a quiet, obedient version of me. Not a shiny prop for their public image. Just me. Layla confidently stood up, tapping her glass to make a toast. "I wrote something special for Mom," she announced, pulling out a folded piece of paper. The busy room went happily quiet. When I was a little girl, I used to constantly ask why I didn't have loving grandparents like all the other kids at school. Layla began, her eyes shining in the candlelight. "Mom always told me the gentle truth, that they had made a very harsh choice, and that their choice was absolutely not my fault. It took me years to truly understand how heavy that burden was." She looked directly down the table at me, her smile radiant. "But I fully understand now. And I know that everything I currently have, and everything I am today, is entirely because you stubbornly refused to let their cruel choice define our worth." She raised her sparkling glass high in the air. "To the beautiful family we proudly build, not the broken one we are accidentally born into." Everyone at the table raised their glasses and drank. Later that evening, long after the dirty dishes were cleared, and the happy guests were scattered throughout my cozy house drinking hot coffee, I stood alone at the frosted kitchen window, watching the snow gently fall. Layla quietly appeared right beside me, bumping her shoulder playfully against mine. "Are you okay?" I looked at my incredible daughter. Then I looked at this entire magnificent life I had painstakingly assembled from the burnt ruins of everything I thought I had lost. "Yeah," I smiled softly, feeling a deep, unbreakable peace settle into my bones. "I really am. If you are still here, sharing this quiet moment looking out at the snow with me, thank you." Reliving this truth wasn't easy, but sharing it with all its messy, painful, and unfiltered intensity feels like a necessary kind of healing. Stories like this, the ones forged in the fire of real life, remind us that we are never truly alone in the dark. If this journey resonated with your own, or if you found a piece of your own resilience mirrored in these words, I invite you to stay connected. Please consider taking a moment to like and subscribe to join our community. There are so many more powerful, unvarnished stories waiting to be shared, and every single one of us deserves to be truly seen.